At this time, I'd like to introduce the next panel. This will be led by Dr. Michael Tyra, professor at Thunderbird, and this will be a very unique. So it's my great pleasure to introduce Dr. Michael Tyra, and he will move forward and introduce everybody else in the panel. So thank you everyone for joining. Looking forward to this very, very interesting and innovative panel.
Thank you, Anand. I appreciate it. So grateful again to be back with Davos Worldwide. The quality and the quality and the importance of these conversations that we've had are just critical for what we're working on today. And I'm so grateful that we have a chance to be back. As Anand mentioned, my name is Dr. Michael Tyra. I'm the Chief Strategy and Development Officer at BioAstra, and I'm also a consultant with the Phoenix Philanthropy Group. And I'm thrilled to be moderating today's discussion. The premise of today's conversation is simple. The problems that we face as a global society are large, but the capital stack that funds these solutions is often still fragmented and often mispriced. Philanthropy is catalytic, but it's insufficient in many ways to address the depth and the scale of the problems that we face. Public capital is constrained. Traditional venture and growth equity often struggles with the time horizons, the risk, and the measurements. So the question that we have to interrogate is what structures, what incentives, and what underwriting frameworks can unlock scaled capital into the frontier solutions with credible pathways to both impact and returns. So today we'll focus on dual use and frontier technology, particularly space-enabled capabilities, not as a novelty, but as a emerging platform for investable solutions in healthcare, environmental resilience, and critical infrastructure. We'll also address the constraints that matter to the allocators: risk allocation, liquidity, duration, validation, unit economics, regulatory and procurement pathways, and the challenges of translating impact into bankable outcomes. So the goal here is to leave you with a sharp review of what's working, what's not working, and a clear call to action for investors, institutions, and for builders. So I'm really thrilled to be joined today by some amazing leaders within the space. Tess Mateo, who works at the intersection of institutional capital and public-private execution, with experience advising the UN on climate and gender and structuring public partnerships across energy, water, health, and food. She brings a very clear view of what it takes to move from pilots to scale and what allocators need to see to underwrite frontier risk. And Savi Globe, who is the co-founder and CEO of BioAstra, building at the frontier of space-driven biomedical innovations. She'll be able to ground the conversation in an operator's reality, including BioAstra's Twin Astra program, which I'm personally very invested in and excited about, and what it takes to finance dual-use science and Earthside health with dual-use science with real Earthside health implications. So, Tess, I was hoping that we could start with you today, if you don't mind, kind of setting the scene for us. Can you talk a little bit through your experience, where we are when it comes to our ability to channel capital towards critical global challenges? Why do we still see trillion-dollar annual funding gaps in the UN SDGs? What systemic shifts are we seeing that need to still kind of be improved to get us where we need to be?
Well, that's actually a big topic this week. And I'm sorry to say that the geopolitical scenario is moving capital away from the U.S., which is an interesting conversation that's been happening a lot this week. That it's when we're dealing with global challenges and you have to be innovative in some of these things, especially frontier technologies, or when you're trying to serve an unproven market, those kinds of things require a leap of faith and trust. And in the environment that we are currently in, it's a little bit, it hasn't been like this before. And that's why we're entering into a new phase. But what I can tell you, which is exciting, is that now there's new innovative ways in which people are moving capital around into projects that they think there's real promise for the future. So I just left a session, not even 10 minutes ago, where Binance, which is one of the crypto platforms, is actually funding projects in the developing world. Like, people are coming up with innovative ways to get capital to where it's needed. But the most important part is when you have regulations that you think you can that you need to anchor these investments. That's where the risk profile is really important because that's the only way they can price that. And I'm not sure if you know, I'm kind of I'm going between, are we investing in space, which is a sector that everybody's interested in, or are we investing as technologies that data resides in space that can help address some of the problems that are here on the planet. So, and people are looking at it differently. So it's kind of exciting in that way. People are not, I'd say, let's say 2 years ago, everybody had an SDG bin on their lapel. Now, really very few are. I just find like these little subtle nuances of what people are doing reflect what they want to be perceived as. So I'll leave that at, and then we can keep going with the conversation and asking questions. But that's what's been a real shift. But the conversation has been dominated by geopolitical issues right now.
Oh, I can imagine. Savi, can you take us a little bit into the space realm? BioAstra, as I very well know, has as its mission pushing the boundaries of, human health to really optimize the dual use nature of the potential of research in space, but also as the space industry grows, ensuring that we are able to leverage for the good of the public and for the good of life on Earth, the ability for us to translate advances that we need to make humans an interplanetary species if we choose to do that for the benefit of thriving here on Earth. But doing that involves some real hurdles. Can you talk about what those hurdles have been that you've experienced and kind of how you've seen the landscape shift over the last 3 to 4 years?
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you for having me here. I'm very honored to be here, and I'm always honored to be on the same Zoom as Tess, one of my favorite people. I want to address a couple of things. When we use dual use, particularly in the geopolitical universe that we are in now, we're not talking dual use in the traditional defense sector. We're talking about what in the space sector we call aerospace and terrestrial. So I just want to set the stage that BioAstra is not a defense company and we're not necessarily working on defense solutions. We are a healthcare company that just happens to do most of our research in space. And so the reason why we do most of our research in space is that space is a very unique environment from a scientific perspective in the way that it impacts biology that evolves for life on this planet. Space is a forcing function. It changes the molecular makeup of biological bodies. So this can be humans, this is plants, this is animals, this is anything that frankly came up and evolved on planet Earth changes when we take it off planet Earth, which is special and unique for experimental design and discovery as it relates to understanding health and disease on planet Earth. So some of the things that we experience in our bodies as a result of spaceflight, we see muscle and bone loss, which is related to aging here on Earth. We see cognitive function decline, which is also a chronic disease here on Earth. We see cellular changes that look a lot like cancer. Not cancer. We have not seen cancer in space, but we see molecular changes that help us understand how cells grow and mutate, which is a function of understanding cancer here on Earth. So this is why we at BioAstra and my colleagues and many of our collaborators around the world care about understanding biomedical research in space. There are many hurdles that we can talk about. We can talk about space is hard. Space is very hard. It's hard to get humans to space. It's hard to keep humans alive in space. I think that I'm not going to talk about the infrastructure side. There are a lot of people who are working on this right now, really exciting people and exciting companies. Everybody knows SpaceX. SpaceX has changed the landscape and what we can do as it relates to payloads and missions and the cadence of getting stuff off of planet Earth, stuff and humans. But then there's also the up and coming the CDRs, the new destinations that are equally exciting. So we're talking VAST, we're talking Starlab, we're talking Axiom. I know that you talked to Tej Paul on Monday. This is very exciting because what on the infrastructure side, what this is enabling is transformation in capital outside of the federal and traditionally held government space. And it's moving, and it's moving. I'm saying that in present tense, but it's past tense. It's moved capital into the commercial space that is enabling tremendous rapid innovation. All of that's great. On the biomedical side, we're not seeing that same translational shift. I think that the big argument that we get often is, well, for 4 humans in space at any given time, or how do you scale this? Why is this important? And really, it comes down to the leveraging discovery and leveraging what we can do in space, not necessarily how many humans are going to space that will translate these discoveries for Earth. And ultimately, that's what we want to do. We see space as a forcing function for biologic change, but also a forcing function for technology. Everything that we fly in space, we say we can't take a hospital with us. So everything that we fly for those 4 humans going to the moon in just a couple of weeks, it has to be small, it has to be rugged, it has to be self-powered, and to some extent autonomous, because as we go further and further away from planet Earth, these systems have to be able to work without ground control behind them. And what that means for transformational shift here on Earth is if we take those same constraints and apply them to any healthcare setting on planet Earth, we are able to provide care to remote areas, to low resource areas, to areas where there aren't professionals immediately at hand, leveraging technology to distribute healthcare innovation to any corner of the globe. Was
Wonderful.
that a long answer?
No, that was a great answer. That was amazing.
And I
Um,
really think that there's a
yeah.
lot of opportunities, the reframing of space as an investment opportunity. If you if it's not just about, I mean, there's a lot going into the defense and the cybersecurity, but also now it's becoming an energy source, right? And now tied to health outcomes and research. I mean, so the context of which space investments are out there today is very, very narrow. And that's where the huge opportunity is because there's what we've seen now is that there's a lot of different kinds of capital, and the sustainable development goals, the blended finance, the innovative financing products, because there are communities that didn't have access to capital, but there's a lot of innovation that went into launching some of these programs on the ground, like these renewable energy transition plans or the migration or adaptation plans, any of those kinds of plans. So it is, I think, reframing exactly the way Savi has shared that is going to unlock, because then now you're not going after the bucket that was only a small size, but you're going after more buckets and more available capital of which people want to see progress. And there is great, I mean, on the agendas, we've had more longevity panels that I've seen ever. Like it's really, really been, off on the promenade. I think every single venue had at least one or two longevity panels. So I think what Savi was sharing and the work of BioAstra is going to be perfectly poised for some of that.
Well, Tess, kind of getting a little bit more into the weeds on kind of the investment front, impact investing traditionally, I mean, it just like space, it's kind of an increasingly emerging area of focus, especially as we see as a global society that, there's a limited both will and capacity for any one sector to address some of the major issues, whether it's climate change, whether it's sustainability, conservation, food deserts, healthcare deserts. we've seen that there is a requirement for cross-sector collaboration, especially in capital generation, to be able to address some of these things. But you know better than anyone that there's been significant issues with scaling and uh, introducing kind of the impact investing model into the mainstream. How do we, space necessarily isn't also tied in necessarily to the impact investing sphere either. So how do you make and overcome both the hurdles and a lack of kind of familiarity amongst many investors with the impact investing model, with also a lack of familiarity in how space kind of fits into that? Where are we missing the boat on that?
Well, no, I think that's where Savi's translation of what her bioastra is doing for one mankind, for humans, but as well as for other biological processes. It's not just human health, right? I mean, all of these can be applied to other things like basically any living organism. So I think that that translation, just like impact investing took a long time, and you had to translate what these impacts meant to the larger community. But unless that happens, that's not there's a huge education cycle. And it's also an education cycle within the space community because the space community doesn't talk in those terms, right? So the focus has been on hardware. The focus has been on infrastructure praise, bringing down the cost of sending rockets out there. And so now that we have something that's kind of affordable, and then if you say, well, instead of taking 14 years to develop a drug, now you can condense that faster off planet. And then if you add on computing cycles are now gonna, with AI and with quantum, you can accelerate some of that even on the analytical side. Then it becomes a whole different kind of investment opportunity. But I do think that it will be a longer cycle time to do that in translation. And because everyone's so distracted right now with the geopolitical challenges and those risks, so they're not even, you have to find those who were early in some sectors. Those are going to be the same ones who are going to be early in this sector as well.
Thank you. Well,
I
Savi, then
Can I
let's
comment on that
yeah,
quick?
please.
So like impact investment is as Tess says, like is new to us. It's new. It's a new way of thinking for not just the space community, but certainly my company. And I'm very grateful to have someone like Michael leading the charge. But I think that an argument could be made that space belongs as its own asset class in the impact investment universe. And if we can make an argument for space as an investment class that has these long timelines, which impact investment is usually really good at tolerating, doesn't belong like VC, I'm fundraising right now. So, I know the timelines that VC is looking for an ROI. Impact investment has higher tolerance, and philanthropy can only get us so far. So, if we can build this asset class around aerospace, and I think there were a number of panels I've seen on my feed. There's a number of panels of people at Davos talking about this week,
Yeah.
where healthcare is a bucket inside that translational piece that also holds energy, that also holds data, that's basically like leveraging space as I don't know, a new rail race, a global infrastructure. Um,
Yeah. And maybe it's not called impact investing because I think maybe we might be confusing. So VCs have a fiduciary responsibility to return, and they have to close out by a certain time frame set by the regulations of the sector, right? So everything's in some sense, when we create new asset classes or new instruments, they're going to have its own set of rules. And I think you're right. I think that's absolutely true that there is room for innovation in the funding of new sectors like space. So the question is, just like impact investing didn't exist 20 years ago, right? You had responsible funds, the PRI, do no harm, but now you're doing much forward thinking. But as you said, but that was the innovation of the financial community that drives all of that. But you're right, it really, but in the absence of that existing today, you can you can access these other forms of existing capital if you pay by whatever rules exist today, and then you hope you change them because then it becomes better and easier for everybody else. We're in that timeline, right? So it's kind of like um, and it's really exciting when you can innovate along those lines.
Well, Savi, let's kind of use the last 7 minutes to talk about how this works in reality. Can you tell us about Twin Astra, about kind of BioAstra's own initiative that fits within this realm and requires the types of financial instruments that we're talking about to make it a reality?
Mm. So for BioAstra, as we've talked about, we're a biomedical research company, and one of the biggest challenges as scientists that we have in aerospace research is lack of control of the experimental design. So my background for decades was in clinical research, and if I'm designing an FDA or a study to submit to the FDA to have my compound approved to go to the market, I have to control pretty much every aspect of my study to prove that what I am doing works. I also have to have large numbers of patients, which is something that we simply can't do in space yet. But this is all to say that I control who's enrolled in my trial. I control what's, conducted with my patients, what studies are done, control what medications they take, and all of this leads me to say yes or no, my drug worked or made my patient better. In space, one of the things that has limited us is NASA does incredible research with their astronauts, but it's mission-based research. It's research to advance the NASA directive forward, not necessarily to feed back into the healthcare or biological science marketplace. There are parts of NASA that have done this very, very well. The Open Data Science Repository, of which we have many friends, has done this very well, feeding biologic data back into the research community to use at a larger scale. But by and large, we don't have control over the experiment. So BioAstra came forward and said, we want to design our own experiments with humans in space. The only way to do this is to do our own missions. So Twin Astra is a reflection, is actually the platform by which we are going to run our own human missions into space, starting in LEO for our crew training, and moving eventually out to lunar and hopefully Martian orbit to understand humans in deep space scenarios as well. And what makes our program unique is that we are taking our experience from the NASA twin study and expanding that. Identical twins are a perfect natural made case and control experimental design. So we are taking identical twins and training them to be astronauts to conduct this research with us. What makes Twin Astra unique from a investment plan is one, the large amounts of capital that are required to make this happen, but also the vast amount of translational impact that can and will happen as a result of these missions. We're talking about data sets that are non-reproducible. You can't reproduce these findings on Earth. If we could, we would. We're talking about a longitudinal set that doesn't exist anywhere in aerospace. And we're talking about opportunities to bring technology that has tremendous applications here on Earth up to space with us and try it out in a way that we can't do when we are just a single player in a larger mission. And so we like to think of BioAstra as a lens to understand how this type of large scale investment and timelines can work to understand research as a platform in space for Earth translation moving forward.
Savi, isn't you have a nonprofit associated with BioAstra as well?
Yeah,
And
BioAstra
so,
is a profit, yes.
yes, I just want to make sure that the audience knew that because when you're asking for investments, people expect a return. And in many cases, like this has a much longer tail So in the beginning, it may start out as, seeding an idea. So that way the audience knows.
Yeah. So we are a nonprofit. BioAstra is a 501(c)(3). Uh, as part of our mission mandate in my career, I had a mentor who would say that nobody was ever cured by a PDF. And so when I talk about translation, it is this idea exactly that in research and in academia, so often we conduct our study, we publish our results, and that's when the process kind of dies. We get a great paper out in Nature or, New England Journal of Medicine and say, okay, well, we did it, so let's move on to the next experiment. BioAstra serves to conduct the research, to work with academics, to work with companies, to publish great results, but ultimately identify products and technologies that are ready for market and spin them out into the commercial space. This is part of the business model of the nonprofit, where the nonprofit maintains a small percentage of equity in the spin out for future downstream revenue. But then the companies that leave BioAstra have to stand on their own and raise their own investments and become stable and sustaining companies. So when I talk about investment, I am speaking as a nonprofit for BioAstra, but clearly seeing the translational investable space that will be derived out of the work that we do. Oh, Michael, you're on mute.
Sorry. Thank you so much to both of you. I think this was a really great kind of way to cap the conversation. Lots more that we can talk about, and I'm sure we'll have the opportunity to do so as we move forward. But thank you so much for taking so much of your time out today to contribute to a really important conversation. And thank you again to Davos Worldwide for hosting us. Thank you, everybody. We'll
Thank you.
see you next
Bye.
time. Bye-bye.